Hey, everybody, and welcome to this month's book club discussion. This is the book of the month discussion with Rachel Hanna, and the book of the month, of course, is The Beach House, the first book in her South Carolina Sunset series. Everybody, welcome Rachel, a USA Today bestselling author, and we're so happy to have her with us today. And of course, Grace is back, and Grace and I are going to grill Rachel and get all the answers that we can about all the questions we can think of. And she will also, I think, be popping in on the post once it's posted in the group. And if you have additional questions, just put them in comments and Rachel will respond because she's done that some already. So Rachel, first thing I always like to talk about is get a little bit of your background. I know that you write this series that's set in South Carolina, the South Carolina Sunset series, but I understand you're from Atlanta. Can you give us, did you vacation in South Carolina? Do you just love South Carolina beaches? And give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, so I am from about an hour, well, depends on traffic, how far I am from Atlanta, but I'm about 45 minutes northeast of Atlanta at one home, and then I also have a new home in the North Georgia Blue Ridge Mountain area. So I did vacation. The first time I went to the Lowcountry area was Pawleys Island, and I just sort of got out a map one day and I was like, I'm kind of tired of, we always went to the Gulf, and I love the Gulf. It's beautiful, but it had been a bunch of times in a row, and I was like, there's beaches in South Carolina. So let me try to find something. I found Pawleys Island on a map and I was like, let's try that. So we started going to Pawleys Island. I've been to Fripp Island. Of course, I've been to Charleston. So I love that area because it's just a different feel, I guess, than a lot of the areas I had been to, like in Florida or, Gulf Shores, that kind of area. It's beautiful, but there's a lot more tourists and condo buildings and things like that. So I really loved the feel of the Low Country, that you could kind of, especially on Fripp Island, it's like you're in the woods and there's deer everywhere, and then you're at the beach. It's such an interesting place to go, in the marshes and all of that. So yeah, that's kind of where it came from. I saw a lot of people writing books in other areas around the beach, and I thought Low Country, seemed like a really good place for me to set that series.
Right. So I just realized that I jumped right into this and asked you the first question, and I didn't do the first thing that I said I was going to do when we were talking beforehand, and that is explain to everyone why I'm so horribly backlit. So there's an explanation why.
Witness protection, like Grace said. Witness protection.
Yes, I've gone into witness protection. So actually, I'm in Florida, and through a series of events, which is long and convoluted, I'm here with absolutely no makeup. Anyway, and I'm actually leaving shortly to fly home. So this is not my best look today, but the blue sky and the palm trees are great. So I was just going to sit here and let you just imagine me like I normally look. And Grace objects. She thinks that I should spin around and be on camera. But I'm kind of thinking that you guys are going to like the blue sky and the palm trees. Florida, we're in Florida today. So yeah, I'm going to milk. I think I'm just going to stay here, Grace. I'm liking this.
Yeah, I can see you're kind of dug into your position.
If I had makeup on, I'd turn around, but I can't do that. It'll scar people. All right, I'm sorry. We're back. This is about Rachel. This is not about me. All right. So Rachel, I like to talk about setting, and that's a segue to where we were just talking about. You vacationed at Pawleys Island, at Fripp, at a few other South Carolina beaches. Is Seagrove Island, is that patterned after any one of those in particular, the setting for this book, or is it sort of a combination of several places?
It's really a combination. A lot of that is, people are always like, why don't you set it in a real, and I don't do that because it's so hard to make everybody happy when you set it in a real place, because somebody will go, that's not where that is. And, they get very protective of their places. So it's really just a combination and kind of a perfection of all these places, pulled together. So I do have people all the time, where is this place? Can I go visit this place? And it unfortunately is up here, which is not a place you want to visit. So you just kind of have to, but like I said, some of those other places I've been to, Georgetown, for instance, is near Pawleys Island, and it's got kind of that small town, the big houses, all that kind of thing. So there's pieces that I just really pull from places I've been. And also when I look at settings, this is kind of a weird thing to do, but I don't know anybody else who does this, but my kids a couple years ago bought me some of those virtual reality headset thing. I don't play any of that stuff. But the reason I wanted it is there's an app called Wander, and you can go anywhere in the world on these glasses. So I can
Really?
land in any city I want to, and there's pictures like where you can turn 360 degrees, and I can stand on the street and I can look at a house and go, oh, the house in my story is kind of like this, and I can look at it in real life and sit there and type. So that's kind of what I do for places I haven't been, but I want to kind of pull from for the setting of a story. So that's the way that I travel.
Very cool glasses. I need some of those.
Yeah,
I do too.
It's kind of fun because you can literally just say, like, I want to be in the middle of the desert, somewhere in the Middle East, and they'll just drop you right there, and you can look around, and it's like real pictures and sometimes video of different places. So it's really neat. You can go into like museums or castles or cathedrals, things like that. So it's really kind of cool.
Okay, I have to have some. What's the brand?
Oh gosh, Oculus is what they were called. I think they may have changed it to Meta, which everything's changing to the name Meta, but they're Oculus. They're just virtual reality.
Yeah, I think the thing about being able to craft your own sort of setting, obviously you have certain parameters within which you have to work. Marshes, sea, that kind of thing. But you can arrange houses, you can arrange restaurants, you can make those things suit the story that's building in your mind. And I suspect that since it's in your mind, that you might be a little like me, where when you're done with the story, you feel like you could get in your car and drive to the place and visit the people. Yeah. It's very hard to shake. And I've actually had done that with a separate town, but built it attached to something else. And when I went down there, I realized what I thought I was building was not that place at all. I was no longer even seeing it for what it looked like.
Yeah.
Because that imagination is so strong. I loved your description of the island. I thought I could walk here. I could sit out on that deck and watch that heron out there. Yeah. While the interior of the house is such a mess, right?
Right.
I could do that. I could walk down that dirt road, cut through and go out onto the beach. Yeah. Sit on that rock. And it was just as vivid and real as if you were describing a place you'd been to every day.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm always thinking I'm not very good at description settings. And a lot of that is because when I write, I'm kind of like I am in real life. I'm like, let's get to it. Come on, get to it.
Well, you're not a wordy describer.
I am not a wordy describer.
No, you use your words really well. And not to say you write horror, but that's one of the things I always admired about Stephen King, is with very little actual description, you feel like you know exactly what your environment looks like and what the people look like. Yeah. And so I greatly admire that. And you pulled me right into the story. I'll admit right now, I have not quite finished it. I actually thought I'd already read it, and I started reading it and I went, oh, whoa, wait. And I got so pulled in to your people and your characters and your place and your story. I kept thinking, no, wait, she should say this to that mean guy, Michael. She should.
Hate Michael.
Yes. And it was like I couldn't move forward at the pace I wanted to move forward at. So I blamed that on you.
Oh,
you were heavily invested.
Good job.
Yeah, people hate Michael. He's they really hate Michael. So,
with reason.
Yeah. Oh, with reason. Good reason. Yes. Good reason. Yeah. It's funny because that series, I just released book 10 in February, and it's ongoing. Because they still sell just as well as they did at the first. People, I always call the beach house my gateway drug. You know how we used to say gateway drug back in the 70s and 80s, because that's where people come in. It's so funny. Out of all my books, that's where they usually come in, and so I always say at book signings and stuff, I don't know what little fairy dust I've sprinkled on this book, because to me it's the same as I write the same every time to myself. But for some reason, there's something about those characters that people they just get through the series. They just keep going.
To me, like you have a big welcome sign on that book, much like the welcome sign in the Dawson's residence. That's, no, we're not actually that anymore. I don't want to spoil things. I'm assuming people have read, but it's there. and that welcome sign. And that feels like your entry, just your prose, the cover on the book, the prose that invites you in. It's a very welcoming, easy entry book that just grabs you immediately.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So tell us, Rachel, about the character of Julie. Was she inspired by anyone? Is her story inspired by anything that you experienced or anyone that you know experienced? Or is this just something that you made up from whole cloth? What was the inspiration?
Well, when I write most of the time, now, not for every book, but I never outline. So that's the first thing. So that's across the board. But many times I will just sit down and think, well, it's time to write something. And I just kind of wait. And I laugh now because when I was a kid, I had a lot of imaginary friends. And my family made fun of me for that, And so now I look back and I'm like, oh, maybe it was characters talking and I wasn't mentally deranged. It's like, I might still be mentally deranged right now, but a lot of times I'll start hearing characters usually arguing. They're always arguing. I don't know why that's the way they start with me. And I'll go, okay, I'll write it. Like whatever. When The Beach House was written, I actually was thinking about quitting writing books because I had been going for 8 years and I was writing just like clean romance. No, it wasn't women's fiction. And my books would do okay, but they would just sort of never take off. And so I was sort of at this point where it was like, I've got to make a decision what I'm going to do next. And I went to eat at Moe's Southwest Grill with my husband to get some nachos one afternoon. And I said, I'm just going to bring my computer and try to see if I can get inspired, by these nachos. And so turns out they were very inspirational nachos. So I sat down and I wrote the first scene where Michael comes home from the business trip. And there was a part where she's like kind of ranting at him and she says something about constipation, which is just completely my humor anyway. And I started laughing while I was writing it. And my husband's like, you're sitting here laughing in public in front of everybody to yourself. Like, and I was like, this is different. There's something about this one that's different, this character, And she didn't really come specifically from anywhere. I think a lot of pretty much all the characters that I write that are the female leads are somehow going to be starting over after their 20s and 30s and like that. They're considered older characters, which is crazy. But and so I just started realizing, there's so many of these women that their kids have been raised and they're like ready to spend, retirement years or whatever with their husband or do whatever. And then they get the rug ripped out from under them. So that's kind of I think it was just a combination of things that I had seen in people I know, or just, I watch, this is crazy, but I watch a lot of like Dr. Phil or People's Court or Judge Judy. Love Judge Judy. I think I should write her, the character is one of my characters. But I like to write, like see these real life situations that people go through. And then I will kind of file that away and pull it in. I don't know when they're coming though. So like the character of Dixie, for instance, in The Beach House, which that's everybody's favorite is Dixie. She actually, the way she came about was really crazy. So I wrote The Beach House at the very end of 2019. In 2016, I was sitting here one night watching American Pickers, and this woman's face pops up on the screen. I had it muted and I was doing something else, and I was like, and I stopped it and I took a picture of her, and I didn't even really know why I was taking the picture. And I just said, she is a character. Like she looked like a character. She was like an older woman. She had all this like a crazy bedazzled cowboy hat and all this stuff on. And I was like, she looks like a fun person. So I don't know why. My husband's like, why are you taking a picture of this? Which I do all the time in public. I'm always going, like, look at that woman over there. She's a character, and I'll take a picture. And so I took a picture of this woman and I just kept it on my phone, and I kept getting new phones and I kept taking this picture with me, which was really psychotic to think about, because I'm like, I don't even know this person and I'm keeping her picture with me. I just knew she belonged somewhere. And so as I was typing The Beach House, I'm like, and then Julie's like walking down the sidewalk, and then this woman walks around the corner, and then boom, there's that woman. And I knew her name was Dixie, and I knew who she was. And I was like, this is so crazy to me. So but other people don't see Dixie that way. A lot of people see Dixie like Dolly Parton. I've heard Paula Deen. Like everybody has their own kind of visual about who she is. but
She's
she's
my
really,
great aunts. Yeah,
yeah.
great aunts. Yes.
And being Southern, I had a lot of older Southern women in my family,
Mhm.
over the generations that would have fit that too. So, but that's kind of, Julie was just sort of a mixture of what I think a lot of, whether it's someone cheating or being widowed, whatever it is that women kind of having to pick up once their kids have grown. And now, what am I supposed to do now? I thought my life was going this way, but it's actually not. So that was sort of where she came from.
Interesting. I think women like stories like that because so many women have experienced things like that or know someone who's experienced things like that. So I think that sort of it's easy to connect to that kind of story and to root for that kind of character. But yeah, I really enjoyed her. And so also the other thing that I really enjoyed was the sister angle. I love sister stories, and
Mhm.
so the tension between Julie and Janine, and the way they work things out and all that really resonated for me. And I don't know, I was happy that there was a sister element in the book. Did you set out to write a sister story? Do you have a sister, or was this just something that evolved as you were finding the story?
I do have a sister, but that actually came really from just I was wanting to write more of a women's fiction story for once, where it
Mhm.
wasn't, because all my other books before that had been focused on, here's a woman and here's a man and here's how we put them together, and everybody around them's just sort of breathing, it wasn't really a part of the story. And I really wanted to make sure that this story, because I was trying something new for me, I really wanted to make sure that that her relationships with other people and especially other women were really the focal point, and that the romance was kind of moving along in the background and would become important, but it wasn't the focal point of the whole book. It wasn't, I get divorced and I immediately need another man. I didn't want it to be
Right.
that kind of a thing. And so I felt like bringing in that, the mother and the sister, and a new motherly kind of figure with Dixie and all these different things would be, a better story to tell, a more interesting story to tell.
Right.
That, it
Mhm.
doesn't mean just because you get divorced or break up or whatever it is that you've immediately got to focus on, I can't live without having another man in my life or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I didn't want that to be the focus. So I brought in other complications, I guess, that looked like complications, but end up being blessings for her.
I think it added such a nice layer of depth to it. When Sue Ann shows up at the front door and you're thinking, well, I don't believe for a minute she's actually going to stay in this house. you know, and then you understand she had ulterior motives for showing up at the house and she's leaving something behind. And I really kind of liked how, I mean, it was painful to hear the sisters go at each other,
Mhm.
but I liked how you did that. You know what I mean? I have a sister too, but we're not close in age, and I love her very much, and she loves me. We're very helpful. I can't imagine being in that position where you've got a sister who's close in age, and there's a little more rivalry, and just you don't get along, but you're not, either of you are bad people.
Yeah.
You just aren't getting along, and the mother has her own issues, which probably contributes to it. So I liked what that added, because when we walk in and we see what she goes through, and then we go out to this island and you introduce Dawson and he's there in the doorway and you're like, oh, and yes, if you had gone too far too fast, that really takes away from giving respect to the pain
Yeah.
that she has just gone through.
Yeah. And I think with with the sister and with the mom, I think what I was really trying to do, and what I try to do with all my characters, like you said, they're not bad people. They might be different people, but trying to like kind of look under the hood of like what is making them this way,
Right.
what is making them act this way, and what makes them say these things. And because I think it makes you more empathetic just towards people in general when you kind of step back and go, okay, this person's really like, rude or sarcastic or butting into my life or what, like, but what is it under that that maybe makes them that way? And I really love just exploring that in stories of trying to kind of make somebody the bad guy or seem to be the bad guy, but then you sort of find yourself liking them before it's over. Not Michael.
Right.
We will not
Definitely not
Michael.
Michael.
We
No.
will
Because
not.
it's
He
too
does not.
easy to have the really evil bad guy. And that's just too easy.
Yeah.
But I feel in your writing that there's just a lot of themes of healing, of recovery, of mending, and I found that whole feel of it, even through the arguments, I knew the healing was coming.
Yeah, and a lot of times, in or in my particular genre, there's a lot of stories that are too easy. Like I'll start reading, and just for the sake of being clean or sweet, some people the books are boring. There's no conflict at all going on, and I think you
Right.
kind of have to ride. It's hard to ride that line sometimes of giving some real world things that could happen and how people could move through them realistically without it being like a book where everybody's cussing and screaming and hating
Right.
each other and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of angst. And I try not to put too much angst because my readers tell me, I want to read your book for an escape. I want to smile and feel all warm and fuzzy, but they also want something that keeps their interest. And so sometimes that can be, a little bit hard to do because you want to ride one line or the other, but yeah, I try really hard with the characters to make the situations realistic, make the interactions. I love dialogue. I do a lot of dictating for my book, so I type for a while until I know the people, and then I'll dictate certain scenes. I'll dictate a lot of dialogue and things like that. And I think that's, you want that to be realistic. I know I've read a lot of books where I'm just like, this is like too easy. Like this happened, and then we got over it immediately, and then we wrapped a little bow on it, and it's like, and I've seen some particular movies that come on around Christmas time where it's sort of that way, and so mine don't quite fit that most of the time. There's still a little bit of reality in there, but I try to get through it without going down too deep into the darkness part of it.
Right. So this is the first book in a series that currently has 10 books, you said?
Yes.
Is this an ongoing series? Or are you going to have more?
It is an ongoing series. When I first started, I honestly thought it would just be the beach house. I figured people would be like, oh, that was nice, but anyway, let's move on. But readers really loved it. And so I've continued adding, and I just kept thinking, well, when they stop loving it, when they stop coming out and telling me, I need another book, then I'll wind it down, but they have not stopped wanting that series. It still outsells all of my books by huge margins. And as soon as they finish one, they turn around the next day and they tell me, when's the next one? So
Right.
I'm like, well, give me a minute. So I got to have a little time to write it. I can't write them that fast. So that one's just sort of an ongoing series. There's no particular, end date at this point. And I think what people like about it is I weave those same characters in and out. They're in every book doing something. Somebody might be out of town occasionally or something like that. Right. But I do introduce new characters into every book as well. And then those people start weaving in and out. So, but I've never been told it's confusing or anything like that. People seem to be able to keep up with the characters pretty well. And so it's just ongoing at this point.
Wow. So in addition to this series, you have what, 6 others or something, some crazy thing?
Okay. Well, I just finished the Sweet TB&B series. So that one was 6 books. That's, that was set in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The January Cove series has been complete for a few years, and that one's 10 books and 2 novellas. Whiskey Ridge is complete, and that's 5 books. I have one that's ongoing right now that'll probably finish at 3 or 4 books called Wisteria Island. That one was kind of a little bit of a departure because it's got a lot of humor in it. It's set on a little island off the coast of South Carolina, and actually some of the characters from Seagrove make cameos in those books. But it's about an island of elderly people at a retirement village that their family didn't want them because they were very problematic people and eccentric and wild, and so they're all on this little island, and it's about the nurse who has to come be the island nurse, gets there and finds out she's the 8th one in 3 years because nobody can deal with these people. And so there's a lot of funny characters, a lot of crazy stuff going on. So that one's 2 books so far. I've got a 3rd book planned, and then I've had a couple of standalones, and I'm starting a brand new series in July. and that one's is going to be a bigger series, also set in the mountains, called Jubilee. So it's about a little mountain town, much like the one where I've just bought a house, and it's going to have a lot of the same kind of stuff. But again, I didn't want to call it by that name because I wanted to move things around. So that one starts, and then today's actually release day for one of my standalones called The Bucket List. And
that was my next question. Today is release
great.
Day.
Yeah. People ask, and I'm sure y'all get this question all the time. What's your favorite book you've ever written? And I'm always like, I can't say because it's like my children. My favorite book I've ever written is The Bucket List. So I'm just going to lay it out right now. I love The Beach House, and that's everybody's favorite. But The Bucket List was just such a departure from somewhat of a departure. It's written in first person, but it is the first comedic book I've written that's like straight up like romantic comedy kind of stuff. But it's also about grieving and anxiety. So it's like there's a lot of laughing and crying apparently that my early readers were telling me about. But it's very much my sense of humor. So I did it in first person because I felt like that would help me really get it out there. But it's about a woman who's about to turn 50. She's very anxious. She's always been very anxious. She's I don't want to say anything, but and she's got an adult daughter, so now she's alone, and she's been widowed for many years, and she has this best friend from childhood, and her best friend is crazy, wild, adventurous, does everything, traveled the world, and her friend passes away and leaves her in her will, leaves her beach house, leaves her all of her money, but only if she completes her bucket list before they both would have turned 50 in a few months. And it's about her, overcoming her fears and trying to do some of these crazy things with her anxiety, and, just all told from her perspective. And of course, there's going to be a little romance story in there that's kind of crazy, the way that they meet. And so, my early readers, my advanced readers that read it, I've never seen such a reaction from a book. So everybody's been really excited about it. So I'm hoping that people will pick it up because it is a funny book, and had a few husbands too, that their wives were reading it for me and they were laughing so much. The husband said, "Don't tell me anything. I want to read it." And so those husbands then read it.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm love that book. It was fun to write.
I'm excited. I want to read it now.
Yeah. I'm proud of that book. I think it's going to be really funny for a lot. It's a little bit, I add humor to my books, but this one was like, let me just act like a crazy person and just put my humor right out there on display and see what happens. So we'll see.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading that. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It does.
So let's see. You said you're not a plotter or pantser. That was a question I had. But do you, well, let's see. Grace, ask a question while I formulate mine.
Sure. Writing process. I love that thing. So I'm not a plotter either. And that means, so I guess certain types of stories are harder for me to write than, Yeah. But when I write a certain amount, and then I sort of look back retrospectively and see where I go next. Mm-hmm. So I probably write like quarterly, right? And doing that as I go along. How does your process look? You say you get an idea while you're eating tacos, and you dive in, and your husband says, "You're laughing. People are looking." Okay, so you're writing, you're really going strong, right? Because it's always that way when that idea is fresh.
Yeah.
What happens after that?
Well, I mean, I call myself, they do say pantser, but I call myself more of like a discovery writer. So like I sit down, and as I go, it's so weird. Like the things that will come out of my fingers versus out of me dictating are two totally different types of things. And so I always start out typing, no matter what it is. I always start out typing, and then it's weird, but I'll just like get to a certain point and there's like a click, and it's like, I can go to dictate now. I know these people. I know who these people are. And so what I do something similar where I write for a particular, however long I feel like writing that particular moment. And then I will, look back the next time I'm about to write. I'll read over what I wrote the time before, and then I'll have an idea of at least what the next scene can be. Sometimes 2 or 3 scenes. It just depends. Sometimes I can write out a couple of scenes, but if I try to go much further than that, it's too much like outlining. And if I know where I'm going, I'm immediately not interested in going there. Yes. So I have to be really careful about how far I look ahead, because it's like watching the end of a movie to me.
Mhm.
And so if I already know it's going to happen, I've already entertained myself, you know, I'm not going to be nearly as excited about it. So even with the bucket list, it was the same thing. I had an initial list of like the items that she was going to go do for her bucket list stuff. But then I was like, some of them just didn't feel like anything I wanted to really write. And then as I go, you know, then something would pop in and I'm like, oh, this would be really funny. You know, let's make her do that, you know? So, if I even outlined anything, it never would come out the way that the outline did. I tried that long ago in the past and it was just like nothing close to what I had outlined. So it was a huge waste of time to outline it if I wasn't going to follow the outline. So that's kind of, you know, I don't even write every day. You know, I might go days or weeks without writing a word. I'm unfortunately one of those people who needs to feel that inspiration. I have a lot of writer friends who are like, I write from 9 to 2 and that's it. You know, I'm like, oh, I would go insane. Like you can't tell me to write from 9 to 2 because if at 9 o'clock I don't feel like writing, it's not going to be good writing. So I just sort of let myself have a little slack. You know, I'm one of those who works unfortunately well under pressure, and I will go, you know, procrastinate on something and then write. So it just depends on, you know, which book it is and how inspired I'm feeling and how tired I'm feeling. But I sort of write in spurts like that, really long spurts. And then I'll dictate a lot too. So
Do you ever consider not finishing a book? You get to a point and you go, this is just not going to work for me. Or
I do
you
not.
have that belief in the ability to pull it together.
I cannot. I think I would go nuts if I thought I couldn't use what I had already written. I think because I put the time in. I think I'm one of those. It's like I'm going to finish this, you know. So I usually can kind of. There's only been a couple of times where I've written maybe a chapter or a scene that I went, and I just delete the whole thing and start over because I don't like the angle it's going.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm one of those who writes it. I might read through it real quick to check for any major errors before I hand it off to get, you know, proofed and everything. I don't even write a second draft. Like a lot of people I know, they write a first draft and then they write a second draft and then they write nope. Once I've gone through the story the one time, I can't go through it again. I can't.
I'm a little envious of that.
I can't do it.
So you send it straight off to an editor then, or you?
I kind of have a weird process with that too. I open a new advanced reader team out of my group every book so that other different people get chances to read it and help me. And I pick 25 people. They fill out an application and then just in order that it was received, they get accepted and then they read it. And then I have a platform where they can go in and put in corrections. And so they all read it. And then they submit all the corrections. And then I think, good Lord, how did I write this and make all these mistakes? You know, because you don't see them when you're the one writing it. You know, like, how did I put the wrong name? And who is that person? You know, like, where did that one come from? And in fact, one time it was so embarrassing. I did an entire chapter dictation. And normally I do a scene, dictate it, and then I go back and edit it. Sometimes I get too excited and I dictate for too long. And then I'm like, oh, I'll look at it tomorrow. And then I'll dictate the next day. Oh, I'll look at it tomorrow. And then I don't ever get back to it. And then I have to edit this like a bunch of stuff that I can't remember what I said.
Right.
And it does not understand my Southern accent. So there's always a lot to correct. Well, this time somehow I missed an entire chapter. And the readers were like, we don't understand literally any of chapter 5. I was like, oh no. So I went and I looked, and sure enough, I had not edited any of that dictation from that chapter. I don't know how I missed it. And the thing that got them confused was one of the scenes this was one of the Wisteria books. Actually, the woman was sitting on a porch looking at the ocean. And she said, and it was supposed to say she was looking at the ocean as the white caps raced toward her, but it said the white cops were racing toward her, which was a whole different kind of meaning.
Different story. Yeah.
And I'm like, that is not what I was trying to say.
That's funny.
So yeah, I have to be careful with that. But yeah, it's my advanced readers who actually pretty much between me and them and Pro Writing Aid, we edit my books. So that's my process. Yeah.
Okay. So then do you send it out to anybody else or like proofreading or nothing?
Never. And I'm sure there's errors in my books and people are like, you really need to send it out. But I don't. And the only reason why I don't is not because I don't want to spend the money. I write until my deadline. And there's no time left. You know, a lot of these editors, you have to give it weeks or months in advance or be on their calendar. I don't know when I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm always running with my pants on fire straight to my deadline. And so
I can identify with that.
I just had to work out a method that worked for me.
Right.
I don't hire and have never hired a developmental editor for anything. And it's just stubbornness. I know what story I'm trying to tell. I know what the readers want me to tell them. And I think I'd be a waste of me because I'd probably just be like, nope, I'm not changing that. No, I'm not changing. But for proofing, I would love to be able to do it for errors and things like that. But it's like I said, I never have the time because I'm just like, oh, my deadline's 2 days from now. I'll get it up for pre-order. Like I'm just running with pants on fire. So I don't know. It's a weird method, but
no, it obviously works very well for you. I was just curious. I like to hear other people's process and how they do things, and clearly what you're doing works great. So I'm happy for you. I envy you a little bit. It sounds like I don't know. It sounds like an interesting way to work. I might like to try that.
Well, you end up with a much cleaner copy than I do because mine requires a lot of editing. So congrats
mine
to
is
you for having such a clean copy.
Yeah, mine is a mess. I just thank God for Pro Writing Aid and those advanced readers who are willing to read it and overlook the fact that I seem to have no skills at grammar or spelling. But a lot of that comes from dictation. The dictation always needs correcting, and the problem is you don't see your own errors. When you're reading back through your copy, it's so hard to see your own errors because you know what you're trying to say. So I've had books before where I've changed the character's name, just right in the middle of the book, just changed it to something else. Or I'll be have just written another book where it's like Lila, and then I'll put somebody named Lita in this book, and then I go back to calling her Lila in the middle of the book. That happened one time too. So those kind of things, it's so hard to see them. But when you have other people, reading them, 25 other people reading it, it makes it a little bit easier to catch all that stuff.
So what do you use for them to put their corrections or whatever in?
I use reader links. A lot of people, which is now called Author Helper, I think, but they have a whole thing in there where you can open a reader team. It has an application you can create, and then you maintain them in there, and they input for each chapter that you just put all your chapter numbers, and they'll go in and put their corrections in there, and then you can go check them off, which ones you've already looked at and fixed. So it's a whole thing. It's been there for years, but I don't know. Literally, I know nobody else who uses it but me. So
I'm sorry. What is that again? Author Helper?
Well, they call themselves Author Helper now, but it was Reader Links. And most people, like I track my daily, royalties and stuff like that in there. But inside of that, you also have access to that reader team stuff. So it's really nice. Thanks. I don't think they promote that enough, but when I was looking at doing a reader team, I did not want to manage like a giant reader team, and I didn't want to manage people who just were getting the free book and weren't doing anything, weren't leaving reviews, weren't helping with any of that kind of stuff. So I just open up a new one each time. And I think it helps too, because Amazon wants to see different reviews on your book, not the same people reviewing your book every single time. And so every time I do it, I've got 25, most of them are different people. And then a few that are, get in there fast every time and fill out the application. They always make sure they get in. So, which is fine. Those are my longtime loyal readers. So I'm always happy when they're there.
Which is nice because you get continuity from them across the books. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, ladies, this has been so much fun, and I would love to continue chatting with you for another hour or so, but I have a plane to catch. So I think we're going to have to wrap this up. But tell us, Rachel, right quick, you said you're starting, your next thing out is a new series. That's what's up next for you?
Yeah, and actually the first 2 books are already on pre-order for July and September. It's called the Jubilee series. And the first one's called Welcome to Jubilee. You can find it on Amazon and all the major retailers and on my new direct store, which is store.rachelhannaauthor.com. I have to remember what URLs I'm giving. So you can go in there and you can also pre-order there, and all my books are available there in ebook and audio for sale as well.
Well, I can't wait to read the new one that's out today, the bucket list. I'm going to go grab that. Everybody. Oh, I can't wait. Everybody go get your copy of the bucket list, and Rachel will have something new to read shortly because she is quite prolific. Yes. And I'm going to go talk to her after we turn the camera off and figure out what supplement she's taking.
Most of the time I'm just laying here going, oh.
All right. Thanks everybody so much. And we will see you next month.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.